Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam Pode, Director of Research for Staffing Industry Analysts, the global advisor on staffing and workforce solutions. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Charles Cameron, who's CEO of the RCSA, the National Federation for Staffing and Recruitment in Australia and New Zealand, and the Vice President of the World Employment Confederation. Charles, it's really nice to have you join us today.
It's great to be talking with you, Adam.
We're meeting the day after the very successful hybrid World Employment Conference that was in Madrid and worldwide, which was organized by the World Employment Confederation. And what we wanted to do is discuss some of the highlights of that conference today. I wanted to start selfishly by looking at my own section where we looked at platform technologies. Now, platform technologies are technology that brings workers and companies together. Think Airbnb, think Uber, but just think labor markets. And we were set with the challenge of asking the audience whether they thought this was business as usual or a radical revolution. The conclusion of the audience to start off with was it was radical revolution. But we changed their minds. How did we change their minds? I think it's by looking both at the back and the front, or the past and the future. Looking at how technologies like the online job boards were supposed to change people's minds, how MSP were going to mean the end of staffing as we know it, but also looking at how technology can help going forward, but it's still a people business. It's still really important to have a people element in those platforms. As somebody described it in the session, it has to be a tech-enhanced people business for staffing going forward. What other areas did we look at in the session? Well, law is very important. And one of the great things about the conference was the interactivity and the ability to ask questions throughout using the technology. And people were pointing particularly to the dangers of misclassified workers. Obviously a big problem for the United States, but a consideration throughout. And as a takeaway, I would say it's vital if you're based in Europe in particular, but it would be worth you looking even if you're not, to the Artificial Intelligence Act that the EU is bringing out at the moment, and also their gig work directive. Now, Charles, there's a couple of other takeaways I want to give, but what's the situation in Australia?
Wow. Currently in Melbourne here, I'm in lockdown, and one of the things I think that comes to mind, Adam, is resilience and adaptation. And I think we've similarly seen that within the recent World Employment Conference. And who would have thought maybe even 2-3 years ago that we would be so capable of adapting and coming together and communicating as a global, I guess, interest group around staffing. So many of the things you talk about are absolutely spot on, but I do wonder if the word or the description that comes to mind when I think of all these things is resilience and adaptation. And fundamentally, the word that keeps coming back to me each and every time is the term agency. And it's probably quite convenient, of course, that the term agency jumps out at me, but agency, of course, is, if we look at the Oxford Dictionary, really the ability to act and the ability to respond. And I just think in so many ways, we're seeing before our very eyes over the last 18 months, our ability to act and respond and I guess cope in ways that we never thought possible. So I think, to your point, I don't think it is a radical revolution anymore. I think it is an evolution, and a very quick evolution at that. I think from our point of view, the term that came up a lot in the conference was responsibility, accountability. We heard Sharon Burrow, the head of the International Union Movement, talk about accountability and responsibility. And I think we all agree on that. But I think one of the things we also need to account for is the fact that the world of work is changing so fast that it's very difficult for traditional regulators to cope with that and to respond to that. So in many ways, I think we're having to take into our own hands as intermediaries and agents the way forward. So look, in summary, from my point of view, I just felt coming out of the World Employment Conference this year, 2021, we were the right people in the right place at the right time talking about the right thing. And I felt really empowered by that.
Got you. One of my takeaways, Charles, is summed up by the phrase, it's a very different connected world. And we were talking about some global themes. We were in a hybrid conference, which was involving people all over the world. You in Australia, me in the UK, the committee in Madrid itself. But what particularly in when I was listening to a group of Spanish academics talk about the labour market, they brought home the fact that their concerns was the underground economy, informal working. And yet in a different panel, we heard that West Virginia is offering 12,000 bounty to remote workers. And we have different issues. You guys are in lockdown at the moment, a completely different situation. So I know your panel looked at the connected world. Is it a connected world? Is it, yeah, I can never remember how many countries it is, 200 countries completely separate? What's your view on that?
I think we are connected. We're connected with a purpose, which is to really empower intermediaries, to empower clients and candidates to be better in what we do. However, you only need to look at our circumstance here in Melbourne, where we're about to become the longest lockdown city on the planet. But today, we only had 300 cases, new cases of COVID, and no deaths. Compare that, of course, to what's occurring in Europe and even the US and India, where, of course, we don't see the lockdowns continuing at the same level as here. So what it says to us, even though we're connected in our purpose, the response of government and also the response of unions, the response of our industries does differ quite a bit. I do feel very connected, though. I really do feel part of a very strong community. I'm very proud of what we've done here within RCSA Australia and New Zealand to create a community of carers and sharers. And I did get that sense, certainly, at the conference. I'm not necessarily sure that we are connected with regulators and policymakers globally on how we're actually going to practically respond to many of these challenges. And that's where I think we need to work on a greater connection and a reality of the progress of change. So, look, from my point of view, there needs to be a greater awareness and acceptance of diverse forms of work. And one of the things that struck me, Adam, in one of the sessions was the notion of meaningful work. And I'm increasingly interested in asking individuals, what does meaningful mean and who determines what is meaningful? And I think it was accepted by, I can't remember whether it was the OECD, the ILO, that's such a great range of speakers, that meaning is determined, of course, by the beholder, that being the individual who's performing the work. And I think this really is that evolution we're talking about, this idea that taking the power away from institutions and placing it in the hand of individuals means we have to listen to individuals more and let them determine what is meaningful. So yes, we're connected, but in so many other ways, I think we're disconnected. So it's going to be a very interesting 2-3 year period of evolution.
Got you. And that brings me on to my other key takeaway from the conference, which was the enormously impactful opening speaker who was talking about the never normal in the future and how we focus on the day after tomorrow when we're so used to the baggage of before. I took away from it that we definitely need an inclusive and green recovery. We need to work out who we are and where we've been. But do we need to rip up the manual, do you think? Do we need to do something radically different? That was partly my takeaway, that we can't keep doing the same thing in the same way. And this is actually going to be a time that we look back and see that this is when radical change happened, or do you think I'm over-egging the pudding?
Look, the way I see it, Adam, is that it's a little bit like what we're seeing in terms of skills and what is attractive in modern talent. And no one's going to take away the importance of the so-called hard skills, the technical skills. But what we're seeing is a greater reliance upon the soft skills, the critical thinking, the decision-making, the adaptation, the resilience, and the capacity to think creatively. So do we rip up the rule book? No. Do we pull big chunks out of it, or maybe even place it aside, even in another volume? I think yes. And the reality is that in many ways, the rule book does need to be placed aside, and we need to be workshopping this a lot more. So from my point of view, we can't necessarily look backwards to find the solution moving forward. And I think really, in many ways, I think it goes back to what you were alluding to before, is that we do need to be ultra connected. We need to be supportive, and we need to be prepared to trial and test things. And I hate to keep coming back to our circumstances in Melbourne, but I do feel that we're not prepared to test what can and cannot work, and we're not prepared to accept that there are certain risks associated with doing that. We like control. We like to think that we are the masters of our own destiny, but I think increasingly we're going to find that's not the case. So from my point of view, I think the role of the recruitment and staffing industry and I guess career advisors is going to be exceptionally important to coach, empower, guide individuals, to allow them to make better decisions on their own behalf and less reliance upon government to be making those decisions for them. And I think, for me anyway, somebody who ascribes to the empowerment of individuals, the social contract notion, I'm very excited about that. At the same time, I think one of the things we have to look at, of course, is who are the genuinely vulnerable. What does the safety net need to care for there? But let's not overcare for those who aren't genuinely vulnerable. That's the real challenge, I think, moving forward.
I think in conclusion, I'd say that it's taking everybody forward and providing those tools that is going to make the never normal far more addressable than people might otherwise think. But what was your final conclusion from the conference?
Oh, it's change adaptation, I think. If I look at it, I see this term agency. I keep coming with this idea of enabling parties to act. Not only enabling individuals to act and respond, but enabling governments to respond to critical, challenges that they have in terms of mobilisation of individuals and whether it's the procurement of services moving forward. We are agents of response. We're agents of innovation. And one of the things I love about this industry, Adam, it's why I continue to love the job I do, is that I find that our industry can be so innovative and so ready to move. And it does come back, and I'm not always one for slogans, but I guess assisting individuals, government, society, communities to change in an ever-changing world of work, to cope, I think is going to be critically important. We can rely to some extent upon technology to assist that, but I think people need people ultimately, and I'm so excited by that. So I think the change brings opportunity, and we must provide trusted opportunity. That's where I think the future lies.
I was going to say, people need people. What a great point to stop at. Charles, thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Great to talk.